I want to begin by welcoming everyone on this spring day to the Campagna-Kerven lecture on modern Turkey, which is now almost 20 years old. The woman who had the inspiration for the lecture, Suzanne Campagna, couldn't be with us this evening. She had to remain in Washington. But I want to begin by remembering the inspiration and all of the fine things that have resulted from it over the years. And I would like to also acknowledge Suzanne Campagna's niece, Louisa Campagna, who's here with us, flew all the way from San Diego. So welcome, Louisa. It's good to see you back in Boston. This is a lecture series that honors two gentlemen, one of whom was one of the original Young Turks and an associate of Ataturk in İsmet İnönü, Mehmet Kerven, and also a man who was a great student of Turkey and worked for the government for many years, and that's Mrs. Campagna's husband, who is actually someone who studied history not too far from here, earned his PhD in history from Boston University, writing on the international relations of the Turkish Republic quite some years ago. So it's really a pleasure to begin the lecture by honoring Mehmet Kerven and Mr. Campagna as well for their symbolic connection to the lecture series. We have this lecture every spring in April, typically. Our speaker tonight has sponsored at a Campagna-Kerven, spoken at a Campagna-Kerven event, but this is the first time she's given the Campagna-Kerven lecture, and it's a pleasure to welcome Ayse Kadioglu back to Boston University. Our speaker shares an alma mater with me, which is to say we're both graduates of the University of Chicago, where she did her MA degree in international relations, and I did my PhD. And then she came to Boston and finished her PhD degree at this fine university. As I tell my friends in Harvard, the best university in Boston as opposed to the best university in Cambridge. And Professor Kadioglu is a professor of political science at Sabanci University in Istanbul. And she's well known for her work among a number of, actually a remarkable number of different fields. She's written on nationalism, liberalism in a Turkish context, European fascism, citizenship studies, women in Islam, including the headscarf debate and so on. And you'll find her articles in many fine journals, including Middle Eastern Studies, the Middle East Journal, Citizenship Studies, Critique, and so on. And I'm really delighted that she's able to be with us here tonight to speak on democracy and memory, skeletons in the Turkish closet. So please join me in welcoming our speaker, Professor Ayse Kadioglu, who has flown from Istanbul to be with us this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard, for the really warm and nice welcome. It's actually great to be back here. I see familiar faces already, and it feels like I'm back at home, really, because my first office as a graduate student was right across the street at 232 Bay State Road. It was back in 1984 when I was a doctoral student here. And I now that I think back, it was probably the most important office that I ever had, because it was in that office that I wrote parts of my dissertation. I actually also had a carol at the Mugar Library, which was such a privilege back then to have a carol at the Mugar Library. And also, I was just asking Richard about this. We would have lunches in this very building. There's an entrance on the side way. And I had some of the most intense intellectual discussions of my academic life in this very building. So it's really great to be back here among friends. And my own son, actually, my son is here, who is a student now at MIT. So it's wonderful. It feels like I'm actually in my living room right now, seeing the familiar faces. When I was a student here, actually, I had the privilege to get to know legendary figures of Boston University, such as Howard Zinn and Murray Levin. They were my professors, and I remember actually the times that I had with them. I remember actually Howard Zinn invited one day to his class the surviving members of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade. That was the kind of thing that you would get by being around Howard. So they're actually terribly missed. I had two great mentors, Andrei Markovits, who's currently at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and Irene Genzier, who's not here today because she herself is giving a lecture in New York City. But I've been, of course, in touch with her, and I've learned actually a lot from them. I'm here for this lecture during a week of two important anniversaries. Well, for one thing, today is April 23rd, and it's actually the 94th anniversary of the opening of the Turkish Parliament, a celebration of the most critical institution of modern democracies, the Parliament, right? In fact, from 1927 onwards, it was a holiday that was celebrated also as the holiday for children, right? And when I think about that, I actually remember years ago in an opinion piece that I wrote for a newspaper, I asked a question. I said, is there a good type of nationalism? Can nationalism ever be good, right? Because you see in the literature, there is good nationalism, bad nationalism. There's all this debate in the literature that, that's a bit passé right now, but there is such a thing. And I asked this question, years ago, is there a good kind of nationalism? And I answered negatively. I basically said, no, there cannot be a good type of nationalism because after all nationalisms at the end of the day uphold the, you can hear me, right? Uphold the privileges of a national group, really. And in reality, people lead much diverse lives, really, than nationalism would, like you to have. For instance, and I ask the same question, if there is a fire in a neighborhood, in the neighborhood where you are, would you save your co-nationals first? Or, basically help whoever you can help, right? So de facto reality is really not as divided as national identities as, you think it would be. But I remember answering this question negatively, but also saying, I did know actually that, and I do know that I would try to save children first. I think children are a lot more sacred than any nation could be. So I must admit that I like the idea of a children's holiday. The second anniversary, which is tomorrow, 99 years ago, on April 24th, about 250 intellectuals and leaders of the Istanbul Armenian community were arrested and deported to Çankırı and Ayaş, where most of them faced their tragic death. There were poets, fiction writers, editors, attorneys, priests, medical doctors, and musicians, such as the renowned composer, musicologist, and scholar Gomitas among them. There are actually, commemorations and expressions of grief, in Istanbul and some other cities since 2010. I remember the first commemoration, which involved the expression of grief in silence, without any slogans or shouting, back in 2010. I was there. And it was actually quite moving. I mean, people sitting in the middle of Taksim Square and basically, saying nothing, just grieving in silence. And this has been going on since 2010. And in fact, tomorrow there are many, events scheduled to commemorate the loss of Armenians and grief, basically, for the loss. Now, when I titled this paper, The Skeletons in the Turkish Closet, of course, it's of course a metaphorical, it's an expression that you use. But I wanted to start with, really with skeletons, with bones, human remains that were discovered. I think I go like this. Okay. There's something in the middle. I don't know why. Well, why does it look that way? That's right. Let's go like this. Well, anyway, I'm hoping the others won't be like that. It's more or less. It cannot be read. Yeah. Let me click on it again. Okay. Well, whatever whatever can be seen. I don't know why it is like that. On January 12, 2012, skeletons of 6 human beings were discovered during an excavation in a restoration site in the İçkale neighborhood of Diyarbakır. And this led to the start of an official excavation, and in a matter of 2 weeks, about 38, the skeletons, the remains of 38 human beings were, unearthed in the yard of the old prison building in İçkale, Diyarbakır. The old Saraykapı prison in İçkale was built in 1880. Here it is. That's the Saraykapı. At least the pictures come out all right. And that's, what is called the Saraykapısı, the entrance, one of the entrances actually to the area. And the prison, the prison is located there after you go in through the gates. And this prison was the site of horrifying forms of torture and murder of human beings, at least in 3 different historical instances. These are some more pictures. The prison built in 1880. You can see that 1880, only the 1/8 is visible. And more. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, here I want to show this. Yeah. The prison was the site of, horrifying forms of torture and murder of human beings, at least in 3 different historical instances. First of all, it was known as a place where members of the Armenian community of Diyarbakır were detained, tortured, and killed in the spring of 1915. Secondly, it was used as the office of the public prosecutor, as well as a detention area for holding arrested suspects after the 1980 military coup d'etat. Thank God. Thirdly, the prison was used as the headquarters for JITEM, in Turkish, Jandarma İstihbarat ve Terörle Mücadele, meaning Jandarma Intelligence and Anti-Terror Unit, right? A clandestine anti-terror organization formed within the deep state in the 1990s. The members of this organization were involved in the murder of many Kurdish activists. So during the days after the discovery of the skeletons, there emerged actually a debate, in the Turkish media about the identities of these remains that were found. Now, mind you, this was not the first time, such human remains were found. There has been many other instances. But this was a big one. This was a big dig, and it became actually quite a public event, and it led to a debate in the Turkish media. And while some were claiming that they were the remains of the Armenians who were detained and tortured in the prison of İçkale in the spring of 1915, others were almost certain that the skeletons belonged to some Kurdish victims. The list of victims who did not have a grave in their name in the history of Diyarbakir was so long that many surviving Kurdish families came forward, hoping to give the remains of their loved ones a proper burial. This reminded me of a conversation that Bejan Matur, a great Kurdish poet, had with one of her childhood friends who became a militant in the Kandil mountain. And Matur's friend, after describing the anger that she felt when she saw the mutilated body of a slain friend, said, "Well," she said, "at least he has a grave," a consoling memory for his mother. So the number of those loved ones who went missing was so many that having a grave had actually become a privilege. Hence, it was not surprising that, many Kurdish families with missing members felt that the skeletons unearthed in İçkale could belong to their loved ones. The story about the detention of Armenians in this very prison was depicted in a report by Thomas Mugerdityan, who worked as a translator at the British consulate in Diyarbakir. This was originally published in 1919. And the report was titled, interestingly, "The Diyarbakir Massacres and Kurdish Atrocities" was the title of the report. And in the report, it is claimed that in mid-April 1915, deserters from the Ottoman military were gathered, from the Armenian neighborhood, and instead of being returned to their barracks, they were placed in the prison in İçkale. And by May 1915, all the educated Armenians, namely, doctors, lawyers, engineers, tradesmen, shop owners, civil servants, judges, and priests were gathered in the prison. It was in the yard of this building that the human remains were unearthed. Now, when I first read about the discovery of the skeletons, which basically really led to this lecture, I was immediately reminded of a novel that I have read a few years ago. I had written actually a paper and presented this in a panel in one of the Hrant Dink Memorial workshops that we have been organizing at Sabanci University since 2008. The novel, authored by Edgar Hilsenrath, it's originally in German, but it is English. The title is "The Story of the Lost Thought," or "The Fairy Tale of the Lost Thought." And this is the story of the Armenians in a village called Yedisu in the province of Bakır, before and after the 1915 deportations and death marches. Now, why do I bring this up? Because this novel basically was filling in the gaps, in one's imagination about what happened in that prison. That's what fiction does, really. And of course, Hilsenrath in the novel says all the characters, of course, are fictitious, right? But the historical backgrounds are correct, he says in the novel. Now, this novel is actually distinguished very much by its author, Edgar Hilsenrath, who is a survivor of the Jewish Holocaust, and therefore is in an extraordinary position of being, both an insider and an outsider to the phenomenon of the Armenian genocide. In the novel, Armenians are portrayed by the Vali of Bakır, the governor of Bakır, as people who are just waiting to stick a dagger in our back, as he expresses it. An expression, of course, which is similarly used for the Jews in Nazi Germany, the stab in the back legend. The father of the main character in the novel is portrayed as going through grotesque forms of torture in the prison of Bakır so that he confesses an alleged crime about his involvement in an Armenian plot to conquer the world, reminding the reader, of course, about the protocols of the Elders of Zion, a forged document published in English in 1920 and used as the basis for the persecution of Jews. The uncle of the main character, on the other hand, is one of the 3 Armenians whose bodies were hanged in front of the Gate of Happiness in the city of Bakır, which is, I go back here. This is actually described in the novel, so when I saw this, I could see. So one of the main characters, basically, it starts, with the story, and he's hanged there in front of the Gate of Happiness in the city of Bakır, resembling very much the Saray Kapısı in Diyarbakır. When I began to read about the atrocities committed in the prison in İçkale, Diyarbakır, in the spring of 1915, of course, this novel was, filling the gaps in my imagination. The debate about the skeletons was resolved by the report of the Institute of Forensic Medicine that was published at the end of February 2012. The skeletons were 100 years old. So that, that's what we found out at the end of the debate. Now, I will actually, when I talk about, I will talk about these 3 things, basically, and when I talk about the Armenian genocide, I will try to bring some personal touch to it, actually, tell maybe some stories that I have been told. And at the end, I also will talk about the disappeared Kurdish citizens, 1990s, because it is really these skeletons that were unearthed, really, in 2012 that led me to think about these 2 phenomena together. And eventually, I will ask the question, why remember? Why should one remember? And this looks like a question that, in the American language, it says, what is the word is like a no-brainer, why remember? There is a clear answer to that as far as I'm concerned. But I have to tell you, you have to explain this to a lot of people, because a lot of people say, hey, they say, it all happened a long time ago. Why do you keep digging into this, What's the point of remembering, you do hear that a lot. So that's why it's important to deal with that question of why should one remember? And, what is the significance of that? So I will try to give you some answers on that. Okay. As I said, I want to start this part with a more personal touch. Barhana. This is an expression that my father used. My father is from Arapgir, a province of the city of Malatya, which was actually for a long time, attached to Alyse rather than Malatya. My father is 85 years old, and lately we have been having conversations about the Armenians he has known during his childhood. He was born in 1929 and spent, his childhood, his early childhood, and throughout most of his primary and most of his primary school education, really, he has spent that time in Arapgir. So he does remember some things when memories were still more vivid, of course. I mean, he was a child, but he does remember. Although the thing is, we have never talked about these things with him before, but lately, when I ask him, he's more talkative. He's saying things that he has never talked about before. And as he speaks, actually, I feel that he has led, a much more multicultural life than I did, really. In a panel, actually, on Malatya Armenians in Istanbul, I learned from the grandchildren of Armenians from Malatya that Arapkir was actually one of the important sites of coexistence, a convivencia, if you like, as, the expression is used in Al-Andalus, right? Because I was also kind of afraid when you dig into these stories, you never know what's going to come out. But one has to, be courageous and dig into it. One of them actually said in this panel that Arapkir has stories of its own, and they're not really quite like the other stories in Malatya. It's a very special place. My father's childhood memories actually are filled with, memories of, female Armenian acquaintances of the family who worked on the weaving loom, producing this famous Manusa fabric of Arapkir. One woman, my father refers to her as Marisa Hanım, cured the broken arm of my father when he was a young boy by smearing a special mixture that contained the juice of pressed grapes and then wrapping it in a bandage. My father, a medical doctor who is actually quite well known among his peers as a masterful surgeon to this day, remembers in amazement how this magical mixture had cured his broken arm, leaving no visible traces or pain in his later life. In the midst of our conversations, one day my father uttered the word barhana. He used the word in referring to a female Armenian acquaintance of the family called Eugenie, who had arrived to Arapkir from Erzincan. Eugenie lived alone and, basically worked on the spinning of the thread bobbin. And my father said that Eugenie arrived to Arapkir during Barhana. I wondered, I asked, what is that? What is Barhana? And he was using it as the turning point for the region in reference to the deportation of the Armenians. He was not sure about the meaning of the word himself, but he knew that it had a pejorative connotation. A quick search led me to find out that the word means a procession of people in caravans in Turkish. Barhana meant clearly the deportation of Armenians, but a more detailed search led me to find out that there's a book written actually by a Muslim Sufi who is the founder of a Sarvari Kadiri Sufi order, and this book is titled Tayyik-e Barhana, meaning the naked sword. Hence, Barhana also meant naked. Or rather, when I searched more into it, it meant leaving someone naked by taking, his or her clothes and or jewelry. My colleague and my dear friend Ayhan Aktar, when I told him this word, he told me that his mother used a similar word. And he said the correct spelling of the word is Berhane, not Barhana. And it is used to refer to a ruined and a desolate house or a mansion. So there's no doubt that both ways of spelling or pronouncing it seem to relate to people who are left either naked or with a ruined house. I have to admit, I did not know about the Armenian genocide until I was a full-fledged adult. My encounter with this great catastrophe in Ottoman Turkish history was after I arrived in the US for graduate studies. There's something actually very wrong, of course, with the education system of a country, and I was a good student. So maybe sometimes that's a problem, when you're a good student, then you learn more of the silence and the ignorance. I don't know what to make of it, really. But there's something, of course, very wrong with this, that, when you do not learn anything about how people suffered on the land on which you live throughout history. Of course, all that one needs to do is to visit places, like Arapgir, like Diyarbakir, and see the remains, of course, of the many churches, and ask the question, what happened to the people who once prayed in these sites? The national education curriculum, which is monitored by the Ministry of Education in Turkey, contains books that are filled with heroic stories of national figures. You are expected to derive a sense of, pride in them. At some point in my adult life, I realized that Turkish people have developed a sense of pride in their national history thanks to the national education system. Nevertheless, they did not think very highly of themselves. It is actually one of the, I think, greatest paradoxes of the culture in Turkey, that there is this sense of pride coupled with a low sense of self-esteem. I mean, you would think the two do not go well together. But it's been there. And I've noticed that at some point in my life, that there is the pride coupled with a low sense of self-esteem, which is really a huge paradox. So while on the one hand, there's a sense of pride in ancestors and or the national flag, there's at the same time a low sense of self-esteem that we're incapable of doing this and we're incapable of doing that. There's all of that, right? So I always wondered about the origins of this paradox. I mean, where does this come from? Could it be that people knew and did not talk about the atrocities on their own land? Could it be that they knew what happened was wrong, but were channeled not to reflect about it? Could it be that they were encouraged to forget what cannot be forgotten? Could it be that the land kept whispering words about a forgotten past, while the history books approved by the Ministry of Education were stating the victories of national heroes? Today we know that the history of no land can be hidden under the soil. It is unearthed sooner or later, just like the skeletons that were discovered in Diyarbakir about 100 years after they were buried. Well, about actually it was in February, 2 months ago, February 2013. I was looking at the date. There was a TV, like a debate, like a hard talk kind of thing on Turkish TV, on CNN, the Turkish CNN. And in that program, one of Turkey's best-selling novelists said, "We did not slaughter Armenians like the way Nazis did to Jews for no reason," she said. "Turks and Armenians," she said, "died in the midst of a horrible war fighting each other." I have actually no intention of elaborating on this debate, but I mention it because I thought these words were important since they symbolized a very widespread approach to the Armenian genocide in Turkey. After 99 years since 1915, perhaps denialism has been replaced by justification, really, for the killings. So instead of denialism, that's what we ended up having. Now, I have to say that, okay, I forgot this, but here I want to go here to this one. Well, let's stay here for a while. The discourse of justification, actually, is not new. my colleague Ayhan Akhtar has written a masterful article and portrayed the prevalence of a similar discourse of justification in 1918 that can be discerned in the debates of the members of the Ottoman Parliament back then. The debates, took place during the last 2 months of 1918 after the Mudros Armistice, so November, December 1918. Of course, this is a time, the armistice basically led to occupation, and the leading members of the Committee of Union and Progress, who were actually in power between 1913 and 1918, and undertook the deportation of Armenians. They had left the country. And in the parliament session on November 4, 3 deputies, Aydın Deputy Emanuel Ladis, Izmir Deputy Vangel, and Çatalca Deputy Tokinidis, they put forth a motion in 1918. And in this motion, they maintained that a population of 1 million people guilty of nothing except belonging to the Armenian nation were massacred and exterminated, including even women and children. So this is how it began. I mean, with this motion, the debates began. And they were not actually only referring to Armenians. They also referred to Greeks, other non-Muslims, also Arabs, who also endured, atrocities. And the debates began with the motion of these 3 deputies. Now, the debates were such that the first theme that was emphasized by the debates were, the casualty figures. Some members of the parliament were saying, the numbers involving Armenians were, kind of exaggerated as the way they were put in the motion. So they were saying that, So what I'm trying to portray here is that the way Armenian genocide is debated in Turkey today has its origins there. Really, it's it's similar discourses that are used. On the one hand, there's this discourse about the numbers being exaggerated. On the other hand, there's this justification discourse that I was just referring to. Saying things like nothing had happened, for no reason. Like Mehmet Emin Bey in 1918, he said, "Yes," he said, "gentlemen, I also say that our officials butchered many Armenians, including women and children, and that their properties were plundered. But," he says, "there was a beginning to all of this, and nothing had happened without a cause." So there was that argument in 1918. This seems to be actually, going on today. So it's really a lot more than, it's not denialism. It's something else. It's justification. I think that's what it is. Thirdly, there was this also argument of mutual killings. Fethi Bey, for instance, who was the Minister of Interior at the time, he said, "I assure you," he said, "Turkish people have suffered equal or even greater harm than the Greek, Armenian, and Arab minorities." İlyas Sami Bey, the deputy of Muş, openly asked, "Gentlemen, was this a massacre or mutual killing?" he said. And he answered this question by saying that this was a mutual massacre. He actually referred to the Armenian nationalist movement and the Van rebellion, and he referred to this rebellion as, in quote, "a weapon thrust into the heart and soul of the Ottoman government by Armenians," end of quote. Which had brought about the tragic consequences, as he says, which I myself, he says, hate and am disgusted by, end of quote. Okay, here it is. This is also, I put this, because I thought it was very interesting. İlyas Sami Bey, deputy of Muş, whose words I was just reading, he says, "I myself am disgusted by." He also at the end says, the underlined part, he says, he demands punishment for whoever was responsible by saying, "Muslim or Armenian, whoever they are to be beheaded like a dragon. They are to be squashed." And this should be recorded exactly in these words, he says. Now, I put these two views as two views on governance. So let me read actually the second one. The second one is by Mathios Nalbantian, the deputy of Kozan. And he responded to İlyas Sami Bey by reminding him of the importance of due process in government. And he said, would this situation necessitate the removal and extermination of all Armenians? Like, he's referring to the rebellion in Van, right? Including, for instance, those Armenians in the west, like in Edirne, Izmit, and Armenians living along the coast, the complete destruction of their honor and confiscation and plunder of their properties. Did the government, he says, get out of control? Individuals and tribes might get angry and out of control, but the principle of government action is the treatment of all matters with justice and equality. Now, when I read these, of course, here you see, there's no notion of, governance and due process. If someone is guilty, what do? You squash them, right? There's no hearing, no court, nothing. Whereas Mathios Nalbantian is, reminding us of that there is such a thing. There is a way of thinking about this in those terms. And when I saw this, of course, this was a mystery to me. I asked myself, now where does this come from? Why there is this difference, between İlyas Sami Bey and Mathios Nalbantian? And I really do not know the answer. I talked with many colleagues about this. There were actually some suggestions. Some were saying, well, if you're a member of a minority, you do learn about the law, right? There's a notion of law. Because you don't see that notion, in İlyas Sami Bey's words. There's no law there, right? It's just, like that, the tribes might get angry out of it. It's that kind of thinking. And another suggestion was that there has been some reform actually in Armenian schools. And, the curriculum was such that there was more emphasis on law and due process and governance and issues like that. This was a while back, actually turn of the 19th century that there was a reform. So I don't know the explanation, but I thought it was very interesting, and I wanted to put that up. Now, the debates on the Armenian genocide still revolve around casualty figures, war conditions, and the issue of mutual killings. And all of this began to change, really. As far as I see it, in 2005, there was a critical conference in 2005 on, the decline of the Ottoman Empire, Ottoman Armenians during the decline of the Ottoman Empire. It was held in 2005. There was a lot of debate about the conference. It had to be postponed, twice. There were security issues. But that was really, the first time a conference like that was held. And, things began to change after that. But, of course, another turning point has been the assassination of Hrant Dink. Because after that, there has been a more effort, in fact, to organize conferences and, to enhance studies in this realm. So those are really the turning points, I think. I actually still remember the very moment when Hrant Dink concluded his remarks in the conference in 2005, which was actually a very moving moment. Some of the people who were entering into the conference, they were hit by eggs, and but it was a turning point. That's I remember thinking, this is history being made right now. This is an important thing, and that's when it all started, I think. After the assassination of Hrant Dink, the number of these studies and conferences began to multiply. At Sabanci University, my institution, we have been, as I said, organizing these Hrant Dink memorial workshops since 2008. And Hrant Dink Foundation has been organizing conferences in the very cities, the conferences are actually being held. There has been a conference on Diyarbakir Armenians back in 2011. There was a conference also on Mardin Armenians after that. Past November, there was a conference on Islamized Armenians in Istanbul, which was again a very big conference. So this has been going on for some time now. At the Diyarbakir, I'll go back to this. Here, yeah. At the Diyarbakir Armenians Conference that was held in Diyarbakir by the Hrant Dink Foundation back in November 2011, those in the audience heard how Governor Reşit was leading the deportations of the Armenians in Diyarbakir. Governor Reşit's name was actually the name of one of the main boulevards in Ankara, where I grew up. And I do remember, it has been changed afterwards. But my best friend lived in an apartment on that boulevard. And, when you learn the alphabet, for the first time, what you do is, you read everything you see, right? You spell it slowly. And I do remember reading Vali Dr. Reşit as a kid. The sign indicating the name of the boulevard was actually among the first street signs that I read when I was studying the Turkish alphabet, probably spelling slowly the word Vali Dr. Reşit, sitting at the back of the car while my parents drove me to my friend's house to play. At the conference at Diyarbakir, I realized that I learned the alphabet by trying to spell the name of an executioner. I don't know what word to use, really. Exterminator, maybe. Who was presented to us as a national hero. But there was more to the story than Governor Reşit, of course. A specific look into the distinct cities, and that's what these conferences have been doing. Also portrayed, the alliances between the government officials, such as Governor Reşit himself, and Kurdish notables, for instance, such as the Ramanlı Aşiret, right? And how they collaborated in killing the Armenians and shared the spoils. It revealed that the perpetrators were not only the central and local government officials, but also the paramilitary gangs, the çetes, as well as the lay people in the city, who took advantage of the plight of the Armenians. So there are stages of understanding this phenomenon. At the beginning, you say, okay, it's the government officials. But then you realize there are, those who collaborated with them, and including, these, çetes, these gangs, and also the lay people, who were living there in order to share the spoils and take advantage of the plight of the Armenians. The İçkale prison in Diyarbakir in the spring of 1915 is described also in the memoirs of Faiz Al-Guseyn. I earlier referred to the work of Thomas Mugurdichyan, who describes the deportations in Diyarbakir. But the prison itself is very clearly depicted in the memoirs of Faiz Al-Guseyn, who was actually a kaymakam in the area of Harput, and this was in the 1910s. And he published his memoirs in 1917. It has been actually translated to English a lot later, Faiz Al-Guseyn is the name there? Yeah, it's there. And according to Faiz Al-Guseyn's account, and interestingly, actually, you write his name, the book comes out in the internet because it's before the copyright, 1917. So the entire book is on the internet. It's readable on the internet. According to his account, he was denounced as an Arab nationalist by an informer. Sorry. And he was tried and acquitted, but was dispatched to Erzurum accompanied by guards. And when they reached Diyarbakir, he was detained in prison for 22 days. So that's how he got to know, the Armenians who were in prison in the spring of 1915. And he wrote their story. And he says the government left only a very small number of Armenians in Diyarbakir, he said, these being such as those who were skilled in making boots and similar articles for the army. One of the Armenians he met was named Dikran, and it is possible, to read about his story. It is possible to read about the torture that Dikran endured in Diyarbakir prison in El-Guseyn's memoirs. It is also possible to read about the torture in the prison in Hilsenrath's novel that I was just referring to. And this was actually in the middle of a night one day, I think it was 2 a.m. or 3 a.m., I realized that Hilsenrath had read Faiz el-Guseyn and was inspired by, the memoirs of Faiz el-Guseyn, because in the story, there's a character, called, Dikran. I mean, that's a common name. That's not why I was led to this. But there are also these referrals to these Armenians who were skilled in making leather boots, and their lives were spared. And then, there's throughout the novel, there are many stories. And there's also the story of these yellow boots that actually, one of those Armenians who was hanged at the Gate of Happiness was wearing. And, there's a beggar who they try to steal that, and then because they were helped at some point in their life by Armenians, the beggar and the child, they try to return these yellow leather boots to the family of, this guy who was hanging at the Gate of Happiness. But this relationship really between, of course, the work, I mean, you read these parliament debates, right, and you learn from that. And then you read the memoirs, you learn from that. And then you read the novels. And then you get a picture that's, really much more readable, I think. So this discovery was a quite, amazing experience for me. I could see how the narration in novels helped one visualize what had actually happened in a more detailed way. As I was, writing, this lecture, I have been preparing this. What happened? Okay, I do see something here, but I just go and click on it. Okay. Sorry about that. I want to show you a picture, but yeah, here it is. There were more skeletons unearthed. I mean, as I was writing this text, in the Zerzevan, castle, Diyarbakir Mardin, wrote, and this time they were inside a water tank, and the skeletons of 25 human beings were found in the water tank. This time, the debate about the identity of the unearthed skeletons was not as visible. There was more of an agreement about the possibility that the bones belonged to Mardin Armenians, whose murder in this castle was recorded in the memoirs of a priest. The information was already there. The skeletons erupting from the soil that was once inhabited by Armenians are making it more difficult to resort to both denial and justification. A few years ago, I watched a BBC documentary about the Nazi death camps, and one survivor told the story of a young man who looked at the soldiers who were about to kill him in the eye and said, "God is watching what you do." Now, I do not believe in God. I mean, I have to confess, but this was a very important thing for me. I mean, I was very moved actually by this statement. And I actually do believe that truth cannot be kept from the people. Sooner or later, it is waiting to be told, and the soil that once concealed atrocities is now revealing what its residents should know. There's no doubt that more skeletons are waiting to be unearthed under the soil and in the Turkish closet. There are many people who disappeared during the war between the Turkish state and the Kurdish militia since the 1980s, those skeletons are also unearthed. There was a group that was unearthed in Mutki in Siirt that belonged to actually the Kurdish citizens. Nebahat Akkoç is. You may have heard of her, is one of the legendary women activists in Turkey. She's the founder of Kamer, a women's organization active in 23 provinces in the eastern and southeastern part of Turkey. Has reached about 40,000 women to this day. And I was actually with her in a panel organized around Women's Day activities in March. And in her talk, she used the expression, she said, the lives of families were lost, with the disappeared ones. So there is also that, these set of stories that, we can see. And these two books I'd like to bring to your attention. I just, took pictures of the covers myself. These two books have been telling these stories about the disappeared Kurdish citizens of Turkey in the 1990s. There is, for instance, the story of Memiran, whose father, her uncles, and 12 close relatives were taken by the soldiers and subsequently disappeared during a raid in their village in Şemdinli in 1994. She was 14 years old. The soldiers basically came and took 12 of her relatives away, and she never heard from them. That was the end of it. And has been leading a terrorized life ever since. So these books actually reflect stories like that. She basically says, I would like the state authorities to tell us, here it is. This is where their bones are, So it seems like there is something worse than that when I hear these stories, and that's not knowing, where, the people that you love are, when they disappear. So in the introduction of the book on the left, Bildiğin gibi değil, not like you know it, right? These two women actually recorded these stories. In the introduction, which is written by Yıldırım Türker, he refers to the lines of Edip Cansever, a renowned poet, who said, "Childhood is akin to sky. It is not going anywhere." So the story of Memiran is such that, he's constantly living with that. So these scars in the psyches of these children are permanent. So the possibility of living together after so much pain seems to be the most urgent challenge, on the agenda. Now, I am getting to the end. I'm not going to talk much about this. Here. But there is a background, of course, to the disappeared Kurdish citizens in the 1990s. And you need to go back. Well, you can go back to 1925, of course, to the Sheikh Zayed rebellion, to Dersim. But more immediate background is these post-1983 policies. Since I'm not going into these, I just wanted to have an overview like this. What were these policies? And there was, of course, the law of the extraordinary state for quite a long time in the area. And with that came the visible presence of armed forces in these provinces where there was the law of extraordinary state, what is referred as OHAL in Turkish. There were unannounced searches, arrests, imprisonment. The notorious Diyarbakır Penitentiary, another, Diyarbakır Penitentiary, of course, didn't come out of nowhere. And that's when, it became notorious. There was the village guard system, state using these, people. and paying them, treating them as if they are like civil servants in order to basically make them watch over these villages, but causing harm, of course, also to people. There were the language policies. I mean, Kurdish was basically banned. Even speaking privately, it was banned between the years 1983 1991. And then the ban was repealed, and then the ban on teaching and broadcasting was repealed. 2009, the state Kurdish television, came back. The lift of the ban on the letters X, Q, and W is rather recent. These letters in the Kurdish alphabet. That's 2013. These are some of the changes. Internal displacement policies, forced migrations, regional boarding schools for Turkifying children. One of the best stories is actually told by, Muhsin Kızılkaya, Kurdish writer. He was the youngest son of a big family. And before his father died, he said to everyone in the family, he said, make sure Muhsin goes to school. Like, make sure he gets education. So he was sent to a regional boarding school where it was forbidden to speak Kurdish. And that was his native language. But he says in the story, in the evenings, in the dormitory, after they go to bed, and those who watch over the dormitories when they leave, the kids, of course, would start speaking in Kurdish, amongst each other. And they would tell stories in Kurdish, and once in a while they would be caught speaking Kurdish, and they would be beaten up. And he was beaten up for speaking Kurdish once like that. And he says, that day, he says, I cried in Kurdish without uttering a word in Kurdish. So I thought this is like a really important way to express what a native language is, right? It's the language I cry in, right? That has been my answer ever since to that question. The question that I actually asked at the beginning, and I will actually show you one picture here. This is from the Gezi demonstrations, that took place in the summer of 2013, and this is actually a quite important moment because, as you see, what binds these two young people, one carrying the banner of BDP, the pro-Kurdish Peace and Democracy Party, and the other one carrying the Turkish flag, and they're both gassed, really, right? They're escaping from tear gas, and they're holding hands. And there has been other, cases like that during Gezi. Like in Lice, the gendarme fired at a group of people, and one person died. And there was a demonstration for Lice in Istanbul during Gezi. So this was for the first time there was this, a sensitivity. Perhaps, some were saying, finally, under so much tear gas, Turks are understanding what Kurds have been going through for all these years. So Gezi basically, in a way led to that kind of collaboration at times. Of course, I wouldn't go so far to exaggerate it, because Gezi was, of course, quite mixed. It's it needs to be analyzed in and of itself, I think. Okay, now coming back to the question of why should we remember? What is the importance of remembering? And every time I ask this question, and I do remember, Richard, I don't know if you remember this, last time I was here, it was last year, I gave a talk on Turkish foreign policy, actually, on a totally different topic. But I did talk about the Kurdish issue and the Armenian, issue as two hunches on the back of Turkey, and that unable to go forward because of that. And I ended with this expression by Santayana. this is, we use this part mostly. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. But when you go back and find the original text, which was actually written in 1905, The Life of Reason by Santayana, he's actually talking about this transition to being an adult, like, retentiveness, learning and retaining experience is important because, as you do that, you move from infancy to adulthood. So I always have this answer, really. It's important to remember because of that. Because we want to be adults. We don't want to stay as infants, right? So there's that significance in remembering. Now, this I'm kind of not so sure if I should say this. This is Psychology Today. It's it's a popular psychology journal. And the reason I read this, I am actually the dean of the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences at Sabanci University, and lately we have been working on, establishing a new psychology program. So I have been doing some reading to understand what's going on in the field, so that, I've learned a bit about cognitive science. And so I'm not exaggerating this. This is just, observation of a lay person. But I found out that, imagining the future and remembering the past are there's a similarity between these two. And to me, it made sense. You can only imagine the future by, what you have already learned, probably, right? You say, I'm going to, ride the bike and go to Cape Cod. You can't ride the bike all the way to Cape Cod anyway. But, how do you imagine that? You imagine that with some other moment of maybe going to Cape Cod or a place that is similar to that. So in a way, you need to remember, I think, in order to be able to imagine the future. That's, although I'm a bit hesitant about this, this I thought would be a good answer also. So I'm seeking these answers so that I give them to my friends. You know why? Because in Germany also, there was a historians' debate that erupted in 1986 by a piece that, what's his name? His last name is Nolte. Ernst Nolte. And he, wrote an interesting piece, and the piece was titled "The Past That Doesn't Pass Away." And he opened the bottle and he said, we are really sick and tired of this guilt that is put on our shoulders. He had he dared to say that. And then, of course, the big historians' debate, in a way, erupted after that. And then a lot of people were basically saying, we didn't do it. So why should we remember? Why should we be carrying this guilt all around, right? So this debate is actually, I find it very important. So you also hear these statements made casually in Turkey. People say, why do you always bringing this up? What is wrong with you? Why are you always talking about it? So they say that. So that's why I'm trying to find an answer. Another thing that I'd like to say, and this is my last slide. Now, remembering is important, of course, but how you remember is also important. Now, of course, if it is important to remember the atrocities, it's also important to remember those people who had the courage to, get up and say, no, I won't do this. They lost their positions. Some of them got killed because, they didn't, want to do it. There are actually, some governors who resisted, the decisions of the central, government, right? So there are people, who couldn't find it in their heart to go ahead with these decisions, who did not get involved in these atrocities. So while remembering the genocide, I think it is also important to remember those people who opposed the atrocities, who did not take part in them, who resigned from their official positions in order not to engage in them, and paid a price for their resistance and tried to shelter those who were enduring violence. Hrant Dink always said, the way to do this is really, you don't push this on people because, they carry a weight, right? In the last issue of Agos, I read this actually on my way flying here. I took it with me. There are many statements by, Armenians. And they asked the question. They said, what would you like to say to Turks? And some celebrities, some not celebrities, writers, poets, they answered that question. What would you like to say to Turks right now, was the question. And one said, you are carrying, he said, this weight that is put on you by your governments. So do something, he said. Get out of it and do something. And of course, people have been doing things in Turkey. Another one said, and I found those two very interesting, we have been, she said this time, carrying the weight that our parents have been putting on our shoulders. And, we have learned actually to hate the Turks. But when we meet them, we realize that, maybe we can talk. And we realize that we have things in common. In fact, one of them said, I know how the earth smells after rain in Sassoon. I have never been in Turkey, but I know how good watermelon is in Diyarbakir. I have never been in Turkey, but I do know that, she says, because, I grew up with stories like that, with this yearning to, where we're from. So we also carry this burden with this weight that always tells us, do not forget, do not forget. Now, these two I thought are very interesting. On the one hand, do not remember is a weight. I think that the Turks carry. Do not forget is a weight that the Armenians carry. So it's probably about time we get rid of these weights. Thank you.
That was a remarkably fine-grained and sensitive talk, and I know many of you have questions. I'll ask you when you pose your question to please wait for a microphone. You won't hear yourself in the room, but we are making a professional video recording of the lecture as we do every year, and this way your question and your name, if you care to share it, will be available on the video. I would like to begin with the question as people are assembling their own. I remember a few years back in Cyprus, actually, meeting Turkish and Greek Cypriots at an unsuccessful meeting to bridge differences. And one of the participants, who happened to be a Turkish Cypriot, could have been a Greek Cypriot, you'll understand as soon as I've said this, he said, the problem is one side can't remember the past and the other side can't forget. And I mean, that, it seems to me, is very much in the spirit of what you've been talking about here today. You were reflecting on your own education and the fact that you knew very little about the Armenian genocide. And indeed, as we know, even the word genocide is itself extremely problematic. Could you reflect for us how much of this, if you will, new attention, welcome attention, some would say, I would say certainly overdue attention, has permeated the broader public since, for example, this landmark conference in 2005, which is a well-known moment. So how likely is it today that a somewhat younger Ayse, or Senja, or Hassan, or Miriam would have more knowledge about the Armenian genocide, not to mention mistreatment of Kurds in the East? and then perhaps,
And then we'll.
yeah, and then we'll take,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, I think it's different today. Again, my son, I look at my son, he's sitting there. I mean, his generation and maybe even younger, more younger generations do know about, the fact that their, grandparents had neighbors, who were Armenians. I think they know a lot more than they did years ago. Although I have to admit that there hasn't been such a dramatic change in textbooks. And also something new that I'd like to say about this. I've just read before coming here that the Prime Minister made a statement of condolences, to the grandchildren of Armenians. I really, truly do not know what to make of this, because I have also read some of the reactions to it, but I guess one has to see the half of the glass is full. I mean, one should really approach it like that. I mean, I'd like to be positive about these things, although of course I have my doubts. Why do I have my doubts? Because, well, first of all, I would say, why now, right? I mean, I would, ask that question. It's in a way, it's an offensive, it seems, to do something before something is done about 2015, right, coming up, so. But still, I don't, it's so new, I don't know what to make of it. But so now, even there's that, I mean, this is a prime minister who also apologized in a rather strange way, though, about Dersim, right, 1937 massacre of Kurds. I mean, in his own way, he said, well, if apology is needed, I mean, it's like not very sincere. It was because he was also kind of saying it's actually the Republican People's Party who should be apologizing. So it was a more, getting back at his political opponent. That's what it looked like. But still, it goes into record, doesn't it? A prime minister apologizes for atrocities committed against Kurdish citizens. It's interesting. And also this new one, before anything is said, the day before, April 24th, there's this statement that has been actually published in several languages, including Armenian. But there is a lot of activity, of course, going on the part of the people. And that's maybe also creating some pressure on government officials. Now, I have to also say, though, the prime minister made the statement of condolences, but the reactions coming from the other political parties haven't been that good either. The Republican People's Party, reacted the way it always reacts to these things, although it's a very early reaction. Didn't come out from the leader of the party, but they were like, really, why now, and doubtful. I mean, but what I was just saying. So they didn't extend it. They didn't took it further, if I may say so. That's the thing. They never take it further. They never take anything further. So with opposition like that, then I mean, there isn't much distance that you can go on these issues. Of course, the Nationalist Action Party did what they're supposed to do. They said they cannot stomach this. It's like they don't know what to do with this. It's just, at some point, I think the leader of the Nationalist Action Party was saying things like, maybe next thing you know, they're going to name the third bridge after Abdullah Öcalan because they are sitting and, having conversations with him. There is no opposition that it can set the agenda in a more liberal direction, I think, and that seems to be one of the problems. But yes, more people now know. They have to know. I mean, there are there's so much going on tomorrow in Taksim, in Haydarpaşa, Haydarpaşa Station, which is, the place where the deportations started. There are, talks, expressions of grief, again in Taksim Square. So this has been going on. There was the apology statement, you may remember, a few years back by, some people who initiated it, and then, about 30,000 people basically signed that statement. So there has been some change, but now I'm so used to saying, the expression, yes, but not enough. That there's an expression now, people who voted yes, but not enough in the referendum. I think with the statement of condolences of Prime Minister, I have to say yes, but not enough. That would be my reaction to it. Go ahead, Lenore.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ayse. It was a magnificent speech, so well timed. Thank you. I sat here wondering about the cycle really of genocides or massacres, and we have the very I'll use the word sad because of tomorrow. We have this very sad reminder of the role that the Kurdish, some Kurds had in these Armenian massacres. And I'm wondering, because the Kurds themselves, of course, more recently suffered a genocide in Iraq at the hands of Saddam Hussein. So I'm wondering, what's the reaction today? What's going on in the Kurdish community in reaction to their role in the Armenian genocide, massacres, whatever we want to use?
Yeah, okay. Thank you for asking this question, because this actually was a big issue during the conference on Diyarbakir Armenians. And interestingly, the conference was organized by the Hrant Dink Foundation in collaboration with the municipality in Diyarbakir, which was at the time, the mayor was Osman Baydemir. And he was present in the conference, throughout the conference. And in fact, one of the reasons why Hrant Dink Foundation is interested in having these conferences in these cities, because, you can organize conferences there, many conferences in Istanbul, but it's very important to really have them in Diyarbakir, in Mardin, and because also local people attend these conferences. Sometimes from the universities, people attend these conferences, and there has been a lot of many atrocities committed by Kurds. Were expressed rather freely in this conference. There was this case of the Ramanlı Aşiret, for instance. There's actually a book published on that. And after all of this, I remember this statement by Osman Baydemir at the end of the conference. He was also saying a few things to end the conference. And he said something I thought was very, important. He said, this was a great conference. He said, I've been here all day long for the past 3 days, taking notes, learning and everything. And I guarantee you, he said, after this conference, there will be no charges brought against anyone for denigrating Kurdishness. Because, there's always charges against denigrating Turkishness, right? So I thought, so it is expressed, and there are studies, books that I know. There's this one book called Haber Delal, that's the title. That's about the Ramanlı, Aşiret and their role. And it's also very interesting that, the Ramanlı Aşiret and Vali Dr. Reşit, whose name I spelled as a 7-year-old learning the alphabet, they were actually sharing the spoils. I mean, it's pretty obvious, and this has been written actually in various places. And interestingly, you see what happened is Governor Reşit, after Diyarbakir, he was assigned to Ankara, and when he was in Ankara, after a while, he was charged with theft. He was not charged with murder or anything like that, but he was charged with theft because he failed to give the information, like there has been these correspondences between Talat Pasha and Vali Dr. Reşit. And Talat Pasha was basically telling him in these, telegrams that I hear, we are hearing these rumors that, you are collaborating with these Kurdish, çetes and, stealing the jewelry and, plundering. And in these telegrams, you feel that, the anger is really not the fact that, people are being, plundered, but the anger is what do you do with, what you have basically gotten out of this, right? The jewelry or the, money. What do you do with that? The, gold, whatever. And because he was not answering these, he was answering by saying none of this is happening. Nothing like that is happening. But finally, he was charged with theft. So that also says something, about, I think, the way this evolved. Okay.
One short question. We have a reception after the talk where people can informally question,
okay.
But maybe one question finally.
This is my, Güven Güzel. I'm afraid you're going to ask me about this neuropsychology that I my.
No.
Go ahead. Okay.
Thank you for a beautiful talk. Your presentation didn't quite make this argument, but it seems to me that you're also saying memory transcends periods of social change and structures of governance and so forth. Since the disappearance of Kurdish citizens took place in the Republic of Turkey, whereas the Armenian deportations took place in the Ottoman Empire, huge things changed in terms of the disappearance of an empire and the emergence of a republic between those 2 points. Yet it's memory that really binds these two points in history together, and that's why we need to remember, because some things remain continuous and also carry a potential to perhaps recur in the future, and unless we remember things, despite the fact that all kinds of things change, they may occur again. Sorry, this wasn't a question, but here's the question. In light of this, I'm still trying to make sense of the statement that the Prime Minister made today, because for all I could tell, in his mind, there is a big discontinuity between everything Ottoman, with which he has great fascination, and then at least the earlier years of the Turkish Republic, of which he's very critical. So it comes very naturally, I think, to him to make an apology about Dersim from 1927. But it would take a lot for him to, even though the statement was not an apology, he was making a gesture. And I can't make sense of that at all. I doubt very much that finally he's giving voice to his conscience or anything like that. He had 13 years of being the opportunity to do that, and he hasn't. But if it's a political move, what good does it serve? I have no idea, and I thought maybe we would have a couple more things to say.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to make of it either. Mainly because it's so new, and but my own. I mean, there hasn't been much reaction. I haven't read, how other people reacted to it, because you also sometimes learn from that. But I think I see it as an offensive, really. an offensive, so that he has control over this in a way, and he likes that. We know that. I mean, he likes that kind of control. I mean, we've learned it, all this time. And one other thing that I may add, which makes me more skeptical about this, is. He always makes, Prime Minister always makes statements about, he refers to my brothers, right? My Kurdish brothers, my Laz brothers, my, Alevi brothers, right? He always refers to my Cherkes, Circassian brother. But not once he refers to Armenians as his brothers. Because brotherhood is something that he defines, I think, according, within the religion. And in fact, that's one of the things that's so very, it's so typical of a conservative policy, that he does not approach the Kurdish issue from the angle of equal citizenship, but he approaches it from the angle of brotherhood. Right? I mean, he's, patronizing in a way, saying, come on, we're all brothers, let's hug and, get it over with kind of thing, right? Whereas, of course, what is expected is a set of policies, policies such as, one that is so clear is, the electoral threshold, right? I mean, in order to get fair, equal representation, you can't, go on with a 10% national threshold, with an electoral system like that. But he doesn't want to touch that. He just wants to hug and say we're brothers, but he doesn't want to touch the electoral system. He doesn't want to, change, it seems, the constitution. And change, for instance, Article 66, where, Turkish citizenship is defined, right, in a rather, with an ethnic tone. And this has also been, suggested by the European Court of Human Rights on the Hrant Dink case, actually, that, they suggested that that particular article needs to change, so there has not been move in that direction. There is no interest in, reforming or actually rather changing in a dramatic way the anti-terror law, right? With the existing anti-terror law, you cannot really go anywhere in terms of equal citizenship. So there are all these very clear policies, but this discourse of brotherhood and, hugging, I mean, I'm kind of, but that's what it is, I think it's the same kind of, I see the same kind of thing in this condolences also. It's the discourse. It's, of course, it doesn't surprise me, though, because this is a very, conservative, I mean, it's the conservative policies are like that. They're patronizing. They, they are, basically, they don't go for the argument of equal citizenship, but, they basically say, it's the, what is the expression? The noblesse oblige, the nobility obliges. We give from above. You don't demand from below. We give from above. This is what I see. Well, I think as I talk now,
I want to thank our speaker, Ayse Kadioglu, for making a long journey to not only share her scholarship, but her conscience and her intellectual courage. And this has been really a fine talk, and I hope that we can continue the discussion during the reception and in further visits back to your PhD alma mater here at Boston University. Thank you very much for a really fine talk.